Here we have the Battle of Trumpton Marsh, which is a fictional Wars of the Roses battle between the houses of York and Lancaster. We'll be using Hail Caesar rules from Warlord Games to fight the battle. The basic scenario is King Henry's gold and treasure is being moved through Yorkist territory in carts, and the Yorkist forces are in pursuit in the hope of capturing the king's gold. The collection of figures that we'll be using are painted by Peter Walker. You can find a link to his painting services on our club website. Here we can see a couple of the Lancastrian retinues under Sir Anthony Trollope and Lord Clifford, moving up in position, getting ready for the morning battle. And a local farmer who's getting on with his work is about to have it disturbed by the retinues of the Lancastrian forces moving up and taking up position just by the stream at Trumpton Marsh. The Yorkist forces under the Earl of Essex, Sir John Paston and Lord Ferrer start to arrive on the battlefield, and they start pushing up in the hope of catching the Lancastrian forces before they're able to get their position too organised. Here we see the Earl of Essex moving up and the retinue of Sir John Paston. This is the retinue of Lord Ferrer. And here is the entire line of Yorkist forces pushing up into the attack. Lancastrian forces, the retinues of the Duke of Somerset and Lord Wenlock start moving up to take up positions behind the stream to hold up the Yorkist forces, hopefully whilst the King's treasure escapes off the back of the table. Earl of Essex, keen to get into action, pushes up very, very quickly. Unfortunately for him, not supported quite so well by the centre and the Yorkist right flanks, who are a little bit more cautious in their advance, which gives the Lancastrian forces time to move up to the stream and consolidate their positions there. It's going to make it quite a difficult proposition for the Yorkists to get across the stream and catch the King's wagons. Earl of Essex, his forces now get into combat and attempt to take a small building that's forward of the main position, which they do quite comfortably. This allows the retinue of Sir John Paston to move up in the centre in the hope of getting into combat with the Lancastrian forces waiting for them. Unfortunately for the Lancastrian forces, there's been a flanking march by Sir Walter Devereux, and his forces will start to appear in their rear quite soon, which is going to mean that the retinue under Lord Wenlock is going to have to turn around and get into a position to take them on. And meanwhile the Earl of Essex and Sir John Paston for the House of York push up and hope that their cavalry can start pushing through the main Lancastrian position. Unfortunately they're not too successful to begin with, and the King's treasure begins to march off the back of the table. But the Earl of Essex continues to push on, gets his infantry into combat in the hope of breaking through the Lancastrian line. Yorkist cavalry also pushes up in the hope to break the Lancastrian centre, but they are unsuccessful and push back themselves, and the Lancastrian cavalry follow up. Lancastrian retinue under Lord Wenlock now has to turn round and start advancing on the Yorkist forces under Sir Walter Devereux, which means their forces on the stream in the village are not quite as strong as they need to be. And here we can see the Yorkist forces now coming into combat in the Lancastrian rear. If they can break through here, it's going to be really bad news for the Lancastrian force. But at the moment the Yorkist forces still seem to be a little bit reluctant to get into combat, and this is allowing the Lancastrian forces to consolidate their positions, which allows the King's treasure to slowly work its way off the end of the table. Lord Wenlock's retinue now starts taking on the Yorkist forces in their rear and start holding them up, and then slowly but surely begin to defeat a couple of the Yorkist formations, which means the main Yorkist liners are going to have to get on with the job a bit in the hope of breaking through the Lancastrian front line. They're still quite slow in moving up, which unfortunately means that Sir Walter Devereux's retinue in the Lancastrian rear is being defeated bit by bit. And here we see Lancastrian infantry managing to charge into the flank of the Yorkist cavalry. Not everything goes the way of Lancastrians. Here we see King Henry's treasure being assaulted by a group of unruly bears, which didn't quite see coming. And eventually the main Yorkist line gets into combat with the main Lancastrian position at the stream. But the fighting does tend to go the Lancastrian way, and a couple of the Yorkist formations are broken and pushed back, and also the Yorkist retinue under Sir Walter Devereux in the rear of the Lancastrian position slowly but surely is pushed back, as it's not being reinforced by the Yorkist position from the main force, which doesn't seem to be able to break through the main Lancastrian line just outside the village. Which allows the Lancastrians to strengthen their position on the stream even more, which now makes it virtually impossible for the Yorkists to break through and steal the King's treasure. Here's the endgame, which unfortunately for the House of York is a victory for the House of Lancaster.